Hello, I'm Mike Brown, Executive Editor of Supermarket News, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Barbara Connors, Vice President, Commercial Insights at 8451, a retail data science, insights, and media company that helps the Kroger Company and its partners create customer-centric shopper journeys. Today, Barbara joins us to talk about omnichannel shoppers, something that's top of mind for retailers and CPG companies, and a focus of 8451's research. We'll be talking about the shifts in behavior that e-commerce has enabled, new patterns that have formed, new behaviors that consumers have adopted, and new preferences that have emerged. So with that, welcome, Barbara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. You and I recently did a podcast together here at Supermarket News, and we've had some great response to that. So we were happy to invite you back to expand on that conversation. Just to start off, for those who might not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about 8451?
Absolutely. So 8451 is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Kroger Company. We are a retail data science and media company. So we leverage Kroger's first party data asset to help CPGs and agencies inform better marketing decisions, merchandising decisions, and even activate media across Kroger Precision Marketing.
Great. We hear a lot about omnichannel shopping these days, and a lot of your work focuses on that and how consumers are increasingly becoming hybrid shoppers. What can you tell us generally about the current state of omnichannel and e-commerce?
So based on research that we just conducted at the beginning of this year, we really looked at 2021 in its entirety and compared that to during the height of the pandemic in 20 and pre. And as we looked at the state of omnichannel shopping and where we are today, it really has come a long way. The rate of hybrid shopping, and we define that as consumers that are using both e-commerce and in-store to fulfill different needs in the same time period, is now twice as high as it was pre-pandemic. And when we ask consumers, what do you anticipate going forward into this year? 85% of them say that they plan on either maintaining this accelerated rate or increasing it even further this year. The other sort of interesting piece is we looked at, well, who did it accelerate with? Because I think there's an assumption that it accelerated more with younger generations, and it did. We saw the stickiness highest with the millennials that are really forming their adult shopping habits. But it is higher across all the age cohorts than it was pre-pandemic. So we've seen that accelerated rate, but the stickiness is highest with those millennial shoppers.
Right. And then that kind of brings us to the next question. We talked in our podcast about the two types of hybrid shoppers. What you in 8451 termed the digital dabblers and the digital champs. Can you break down these two types of grocery shoppers for us a little bit more?
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about is the fact that as you move into e-commerce and we have more shoppers hybrid shopping, there isn't one single persona of hybrid shoppers or omnichannel shoppers. You really engage across the spectrum. One way that we can look at this is by comparing consumers that are on each end of the adoption curve, and that's what we've done with the digital champs and digital dabblers. Digital dabblers, as we'd expect based on how we've sort of defined this spectrum, are those consumers that are leveraging e-commerce but aren't all in. So 20% of their visits are online, but 80% are still happening in store. They are overwhelmingly millennial. They tend to be larger households with kids. They value convenience, but they also tend to be more price sensitive. And when we look at their basket composition, they're really leveraging e-commerce more for the center store items and those core staples that they're more comfortable buying online. As you flip that to consumers that are on the other end of the adoption curve, they are all in. These consumers, they are really going online for 73% of their visits and 86% of their spend. They are also overwhelmingly millennial, but interestingly, we see a small group of older shoppers that are very loyal to e-commerce and particularly delivery.
Yeah.
Because of this sort of like nuance, we also see that they vary in household size from small to large. They're less price sensitive at this end of the adoption curve, but are more health conscious. And when we look at their baskets, they're actually more comfortable leveraging e-commerce to complete the full grocery trip because we see all the categories in their baskets.
Okay. So you talked about the baskets. So what are some of the other differences in the way hybrid shoppers use digital as opposed to their in-store visits?
Yeah, so we've looked at this a couple different ways. What type of trips are going online? What need states sort of drive you to go online versus in-store, and even sort of the basket composition. One of the really interesting things that's now come up that I think is a pivot point that we're at is we ask consumers, based on different shopping trips that you make, how do you rank for each of them? If you prefer to do it in store, if you prefer pickup, or if you prefer delivery. Now, pickup is the preferred option, not just for trips where you have only non-edible items, but it's actually the preferred choice for your main grocery shopping trip. So this means that we should expect that this will continue to accelerate, because while the majority of main grocery shopping trips aren't happening on e-commerce today, when we ask them how they prefer to do it, this is now the preferred method. So we will see that as people move up the adoption curve, these big stock of trips are going to continue to move there. We also, on the flip, look at what does the basket composition look like today based on when people are going in store and online. The in-store visits, when we break it down based on basket size, so trips that are super small, 1 to 3 items, sort of like your middle trip, which is like 50% of baskets, and then there's huge stock ups. The in-store baskets have a pretty even distribution across each of these. On the flip, pickup is overwhelmingly those stock up trips. So that is why they're using pickup. And then delivery is a little bit of a mixture. They've got a slightly larger percent that's in that middle group, but still stock ups. We also see that people are going in store for very specific reasons now. So they tell us that they go in store if they need something ASAP. If it's a small list of items that they need, so I just forgot a few things, and I can be really quick and efficient going in myself. But they also say they like going in store when it's a special trip. And that comes through in many different ways, because we see that inspiration is harder to deliver online, and discovery is harder to deliver online. And it's also still more difficult for customers to compare items in a digital environment than they can in store. So when they want to go in store, it's really for that inspiration and saying like, it's a special trip, I want to make sure I'm comparing items. But then also in particular, they say they go online or go in store when they really want to look at promotions. So you can really compare on shelf easily and make sure you're making the smartest, most fiscally responsible choice.
Yeah. We're at a point now, I think, that we're hoping anyway that the worst of COVID is sort of behind us. Right. I'm hoping, I'm wondering if, there'll be any impact on online grocery. Let's say, what does the future hold for e-commerce now that, the pandemic is maybe less of a concern with shopping? Do you expect the online to continue? I know you talked about it accelerating among the hardcore users, but do you expect online to continue to grow now the consumers have grown more comfortable with it? Or do we see an increase in return, in traditional shopping? Or again, is it going to be more of a hybrid?
Yeah, so there are 2 ways to look at this. One is fluctuations between in-store and online, and the other is fluctuations between grocery shopping as a whole for food and going to restaurants. We saw fluctuations last year in both of these as we moved into the summer and the vaccine was rolling out, and then you had Delta, and then you had Omicron. So we saw that there was a direct correlation between cases and how people were both moving to groceries, and then fluctuating how they were shopping in the omnichannel choices. I expect that we will see fluctuations again this year. But at a macro level, e-commerce adoption will continue to grow. There are a couple things that I call out. So one is when we think about grocery shopping for food, we will expect this to continue. There was a lot of debate and research last year done to try and understand, as COVID was hopefully going to move past us last year, would we expect that people would move back to consuming outside of home and back to restaurants? And we actually heard from customers just this year. So in January, we surveyed customers, and they expect that 70% of the food that they consume will continue to be bought from a store rather than a restaurant. So people are anticipating that they're going to have more at-home food consumption and look to grocery stores to buy those meals. So this is a huge opportunity for brands and retailers to capitalize on this demand for for continued cooking at home and consuming at home to meet those needs, whether or not a customer is going online or in store to fulfill it. We actually specifically looked at a meal occasion that is highly driven by or motivated by convenience, and asked customers, when you're looking for the grab and go meal, when is it that you prefer to go in store? When is it that you prefer to go on to pick up? And when do you look to delivery? And in store is the preferred option for the grab and go meal. If you want it hot and fresh, but aren't exactly sure what you want, so want to compare options. And the pickup method is preferred for parents who have kids with them who don't have a lot of time. And delivery is now really the preferred option if you just simply don't want to leave your house. And so none of those use cases say, well, actually, I prefer it only because I'm still concerned about COVID. So people are making changes in how they're thinking about meal occasions independent of the pandemic. And some of those are really going to stick even as we move beyond. When we asked consumers last year, as we were going through some of these waves, if you're comfortable going to restaurants, and if not, why? Two things really came to light as we heard customers say that they actually prefer now cooking at home and eating at home that were independent of the pandemic. One is health. So we know that as a like a byproduct of what we've been living through, people are more concerned about their health and now feel like they have more control over their health if they're able to cook their own food and choose their own ingredients. The other is inflation, and the cost value equation of eating out may not be what it was before. And we certainly do hear from customers that they feel like if you're buying, prices are increasing everywhere, but they're particularly high at a restaurant, and so they still will choose to eat at home. Mm-hmm. So all of that says that, like, people are looking to groceries for not only more of a bulk of their eating occasions, but they're actually looking to change their habits and how we consume food. Now, where we see e-commerce really winning is in delivering on convenience. And so as we have heightened demands for convenience, we will continue to see customers move online and move to omnichannel and hybrid shopping, because what might be the most convenient option for you at one time may be in store and another may be online. And these are really independent of the pandemic and environment and mindset that we've been in. So I'm highly confident that as we move beyond COVID, we will see fluctuations as people start to go out to restaurants and they want to socialize with friends again and get out. But we will also see that grocery shopping will continue to remain high, and people will continue to move to e-commerce to fulfill more and more of their needs.
Right. That's great. What kind of opportunities does it, I mean, you've talked a lot about this, but see if we can put it in a nutshell. What kind of opportunities does a strong omnichannel strategy create for retailers and CPGs? Yeah, for instance, impulse categories, basket size, mentioned.
Okay, so first, an omnichannel strategy right now is just simply a customer-first strategy. So customers are becoming omnichannel shoppers, and so in order to truly have a customer-first strategy, you have to have an omnichannel strategy because that's where they're going. So the focus is really just on meeting customers' needs and meeting them where they're at. The retailers and brands that win will be those that look critically at what their in-store experience is delivering today and what their e-commerce experience is delivering, and identify those gaps and try to fill them. One particular gap that we see that still exists today in the e-commerce environment is in meeting the needs of those price-sensitive shoppers. So I talked about on the sort of digital dabbler side, they are more likely to be price-sensitive. We also know that these customers tend to take longer building their baskets online. And when we hear customers say why they go in store, a lot of times it's for promotions. So in having an example of an omnichannel strategy, saying, I need to meet the needs of price-sensitive shoppers. In store, that means that I want to make it easy for them to find the best deals and organize my store so that you're delivering experience and enabling customers to easily compare items. In a digital environment, how can I make that easier for them so that you can deliver that same convenience for them in the e-commerce environment that they're getting online? So it's first starting with the customer and what their needs are, and then saying, if I recognize that they're going both in store and online, how can I meet that need in both places based on the strengths that ecosystem and environment enables? You've also asked about impulse, which I think is really interesting because um, as we move online, this is one space where you have a benefit of e-commerce, because in store, the impulse categories tend to be those that are in the checkout lane, because you're confined to the checkout items that are there as you're checking out. In an e-commerce environment, you essentially have an endless aisle for your checkout. And so what becomes that impulse purchase that you add at the end of your trip is really now only confined to the imagination of the customer. And we see that actually those items that are added last are now different. So we're able to look at the order that items are added to your basket based on clickstream data. And by doing that, we said, well, what are the items that are most frequently added at the end of the trip? And in an e-commerce trip, it's not candy, magazines, self-serve beverage, or single-serve beverage. And that makes sense, because your impulse now is no longer tied to immediate consumption. Because when you place the order, there is a lag between then when you pick it up. Instead, categories that we see popping now are more around social indulgence. So we see alcohol coming up a lot as the last thing I added to your list. We also see flowers, and we see like health and beauty and gen merch. And so what this can teach us and enable us to sort of get more creative with is, as we move to an omnichannel world, impulse now has an expanded definition. It's not just immediate consumption, but it can actually help meet the needs of all of us that are now craving more social connection and indulgence in a way that can fit within more constrained budgets, as you have sort of inflation still growing behind us, and say like, okay, well now how can we meet this need and actually use this to then drive some of that inspiration and discovery into the e-commerce experience in a way that is meeting the needs of customers and doesn't take away from the convenience that they're really going online to get.
That's great. That's some really interesting stuff. Yeah, some great insights, Barbara. And I just want to thank you for joining us once again. It's been our pleasure to have this time together, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.